All right, cool. I don't want to cause delays for the next one, so I'm going to get rolling here with the presentation. First of all, thanks everyone for joining. Really excited to be presenting on this topic, something that I've spent a decent part of my year researching and interviewing, and I'm excited to present this before. I actually will tell you I did this presentation once before for Winter Games back in April. And so this is the V2 of it. So this should be improved from the first one. This has some experience, this topic, and I've gotten some feedback on it. So it should be hopefully a professional level quality here of presentation, but I'll let you be the judge of it. So today we're going to talk about top brands and how they approach product positioning. And I specifically am going to share some lessons that I put together from interviewing product marketing leaders at Airtable, Shopify, Pluralsight, Atlassian, and Spotify. So a little background on me. So I started my career at HubSpot. I was there, been in B2B SaaS for almost 9 years now. And I started with HubSpot on the product marketing team. And then I went on to a computer design company called Onshape. I was there for about 4 years, got to see that company grow from stealth mode all the way to close to acquisition. I left shortly before, or just before acquisition. So it was really cool to see a company grow that fast. And then I was at Drift for 2 years, 2.5 years actually, and that was crazy growth. That was hyper growth, and it was awesome to see that experience. I ran product marketing there, and now I'm at Privy. I've been here since January of 2020, and I am the VP of marketing at Privy. And we just went through an acquisition, which is really cool. So before I get into the topic, I did want to reference this real quick. So I share a lot on product marketing on LinkedIn and on Twitter specifically. I've spent a lot of my career in product marketing, and I'm probably most experienced in one area, which is product launches. So much so that last year I decided to write a course on it and share this framework that I've used for the, probably 75-ish product launches that I or my team have managed at this point. And so about 253, I want to say, product marketers have actually taken this course. And I just want to offer to any of you, if you've seen me do this, and I appreciate you coming out today and being part of it. So if you use this promo code at the bottom, getting to market in checkout, that'll give you $40 off the course. So you can get it for $59. You have access to the full course. So feel free to check that out if that's something that's interesting to you. But I'm not here to talk about product launches. I know there are several other people that are going to discuss product launches today. I want to talk about positioning. So a few months ago, actually it's more than a few months ago now, it's probably about 6 or 7 months ago, around Christmas time, when most marketers are thinking about, I have some time and I've got a big year ahead of me. I'm going to read some books and work on my skills. I bought April's obviously awesome book, April Dunford, I should say. And it's really the modern day book on product positioning. And I loved it and I geeked out over it big time. I actually took the framework that she teaches and I implemented it for Privy. We actually use it now at Privy, which is fantastic. I can't recommend it enough, the book and the framework. But it really got me interested in positioning, and I wanted to become more of a positioning pro. I've done a lot in product marketing, but positioning is an area I felt like was a little bit of a black box and maybe a little bit of a gray area, and I just hadn't spent a lot of time there. So what I've always done in my career is I like to go talk to people that have done it, right? Product marketing leaders who are pros or experts in this area. One of the reasons why I wanted to do my course, so I could share what I've learned in that world on product launches. But anyway, so I asked my friend Marcus Andrews, he has this podcast, the Product Marketing Experts podcast. I hope many of you will check this out. It's a great one. And I asked him if I could take over for a few weeks. He was planning on doing a little hiatus, and if I could go and interview some product marketing leaders about positioning and hear from them. And so I was lucky enough to work with their team. We were able to talk to some amazing people from Spotify, Shopify, not to be confused between the two, Pluralsight, Airtable, and Atlassian. I should reference their names. So Tamira Neeson from Shopify, Sam Duboff from Spotify, Lindsay Bayek from Pluralsight, Christy Roach from Airtable, and Daniel Cooperman from Atlassian. And so the presentation that I'm giving you today, the lessons that I've learned from talking to these pros, came from them. I'm sharing their work, their experiences, and I was fortunate enough to talk to them and then put this together in presentation format. What I want to share is 6 lessons from interviewing them. I do want to say you're welcome to check out that podcast. Each episode's maybe 25 to 35 minutes in length, and it goes obviously in depth, and I kind of grilled them on every question that most of us have on, even if you're not in marketing, most of us have on positioning. I kind of got to go deep on with them. What you're going to get today, though, is the Spark Notes version, right? In this presentation, the next 20 minutes or so, you're going to get the Spark Notes presentation of those conversations. Okay, so before we move on, I like doing polls. I love sort of like, you're here, you're dedicating, 20, 30 minutes of your day to this. And so I want to make sure that I'm being as helpful as possible. But I'd love to start, this is just sort of for my own understanding, it'll help me talk through a little bit on the presentation. On a scale from 1 to 5, how confident are you in your product's positioning? 1 being, I have no idea what I'm doing. 5 being, man, we are killing it. We feel so good about this. I don't even know what I'm doing at this presentation today. So if you don't mind just chatting in, give me a score of 1 to 5. Don't be shy. Everybody has a different perspective on this of where they're at. And so, okay, so I see some numbers coming in. So 3s and 4s. Okay, Michelle's a 4. That's great. Yeah, Michelle's read the book, so that's why you feel good about your positioning. That's awesome. I can't plug enough. Okay, I see a couple 2s, 2.5. Awesome. Zoe, I'll mention that promo code at the end. I'll bring it back up. So just stick around and I'll show it to you. Okay, so that's about what I expected, frankly, in terms of people kind of usually feel like, I feel okay. I don't necessarily feel great about my positioning. So it's good that you're all here today. So let's start with the first lesson. Positioning is strategy. It's not words, right? So this is something that came up again and again in the interviews I had. And I think one of the important pieces here is that I think a lot of us for those that are product marketers, when I originally did this presentation, it was for a group of product marketers. I realize that's not quite the case today, but product marketers usually have a good sense of this, that positioning is strategy, it's not words. But usually within the company, right, other disciplines, other departments, they usually have some confusion on this. So a lot of the product marketing leaders I talked to really wanted to vocalize, hey, it's not just about like the words that the marketing team is putting together, right? It's strategy, and strategy is meant to be held and owned company-wide, right? It's much bigger than just what the product marketing team or the marketing team is doing. So the first thing that came up a lot was positioning is really strategy, it's not words. And in her book, she has this great chapter. This is step 8 of, I think it's 10, or maybe Michelle, you could tell us, I think it's 12 steps, I want to say. But it's one of my favorite parts of this, because this just absolutely resonated with me as soon as I read it. So she basically laid out these 3 positioning strategies, and I want to talk about them for a second. But when it comes to finding your market, right? So finding the market and how you can compete in your market, right? The first is head-to-head, right? Meaning you take on a competitor directly in the same market. So the best example there, Pepsi and Coke, right? I mean, they're really marketing to the same type of person, someone that drinks soda, that likes soda, and it's a similar product, and the product doesn't have a ton of variation between the two, right? Someone would probably argue that that's true, but whatever. They're competing for the same market. The second strategy is the big fish, small pond strategy. And that's positioning to win a subsegment of an existing market that you can serve better than anyone else. And that's a really interesting one, right? Because it's basically saying, okay, here's this market, here's the leader in this market. And guess what? There's this segment of this market that we think we can serve better, that customer base, we can serve better because of X, Y, and Z, right? And so the example I like to give on that, the real world example, is HubSpot and Salesforce. So Salesforce CRM is the first person you think of, probably the first provider you probably think of when it comes to CRM. And they have companies of all different sizes, right? They have bigger companies, enterprise companies, all the way down to smaller companies. HubSpot is trying to win a subsegment of that CRM market for SMB, right? So HubSpot is trying to win the small business segment of Salesforce's CRM, because they're uniquely suited. They have a better UI, they can provide better support, they can also do it. They also have an all-in-one solution with the marketing that SMBs are using. So that's the example I like to give when it comes to big fish, small pond. And then the third strategy is creating a new game, right? So it's positioning to win a market that you are creating. So you're creating the market from scratch. Similar approach that we did at Drift with conversational marketing. We created a new market, very, very difficult to do. The second thing when it comes to positioning strategy is like this whole like breakdown of like positioning, messaging, and copy. There's three different things. And so my conversation with Christy Roach at Airtable, she had this is a very simple breakdown of how to think about this. So positioning comes first. This is the strategy that doesn't often change, right? You should have a strategy as a positioning strategy, and this is what we're doing as a company. This is our strategy. We're a big fish, small pond. Here's who we're competing against, why we're uniquely suited to serve this, sub-segment better than the market leader. And then messaging is probably the second layer down, right? And so that might, be something that you're looking at on an annual basis. I'll talk about one output of that, or one exercise when it comes to messaging on an annual basis. But that's not, the position. It's not the strategy. It's the messaging. What is the messaging that you want your customers to, pick up on? For Privy, we talk a lot about the tools and coaching, right? So our positioning, we're email marketing for small e-commerce brands. That's our sort of positioning. The layer deeper is that we really talk about how we're helping you go from 0 to $1 million with the tools and coaching you need to get to that $1 million mark, right? And the third layer is copy, right? And we're talking about copy. That's campaign based, right? That's going to change. You might have, copy's more flexible, it might be used, but at the same time, copy, messaging, positioning, it's that order, right? So the copy needs to reflect your messaging strategy, which needs to reflect your positioning strategy, right? The other thing I picked up on a lot from these interviews was like, product marketers aren't copywriters, right? And there is a big distinction. I don't write a lot of copy. I've done a lot of product marketing in my life, and I have a copywriter that I go to. When it comes to copy, I've used them and I've worked with them in 2 different companies. It's different, right? And so I know that to be true. I think this is another good lesson from these interviews, is that product marketers are not copywriters. We can write copy in a pinch maybe, and sometimes that's true that they're both, but more often than not, product marketers are not going to be your principal copywriters. All right, second lesson. This one's a little bit controversial to say, but this is one of the big takeaways I had from these interviews. Marketing doesn't own the positioning strategy, right? Alignment came up a lot in these interviews when it came to positioning strategy, right? And I think it's very true to say that you can't get very far without your CEO and executive team into your positioning strategy. So April talked about how she would partner with the VP of sales to make sure that VP of sales loved new positioning, was bought in, maybe they had tested it with a couple of reps or something. She would basically go and work with the sales team first before she would even go to the CEO and executive team, so that when she did come to them and say, hey, this is our new positioning strategy, or this is how I think our company, our product should be positioned, she had evidence. She had the backing of her VP of sales when she would bring that messaging to the team. Christy Roach from Airtable, she brought up when she does positioning sprints, which I'll talk about in a minute, that she would go and interview investors and executives first so that she could get some guardrails before she would talk to customers. So that sounds counterintuitive. And I was like, wait, what? Why wouldn't you talk to customers first? And she said, well, look, you got to remember that they have their vision for you and what they think of you, which is good, but it doesn't have any boundaries, right? It doesn't have any guardrails. You need some guardrails from your executive team, from your investors on, where you fit, and then focus the conversation with your customers on that, so you can, find that fit basically. Okay, and then did I skip a slide? No, I didn't. Sorry. So the way to think about product marketing, and let's just say marketing as a whole for now, depending on where you're at with your business. The way to think about marketing's relationship to positioning is think about it as the steward, right? Not the owner. The owner really needs to be the executive team, right? And maybe the VP of marketing and sales and product are probably sort of the joint owners of positioning, because positioning doesn't work unless there's that relationship in the executive, unless it's being brought into product conversations, unless it's being brought into sales conversations, unless marketing is doing their part, right? It doesn't work unless all of those functions are working together. So think about, like, for instance, product marketing, think about it as the steward, right? They're doing the checkups, they're probably talking to customers, checking in with them, working with internal stakeholders, but not the owners, not the only ones making decisions on it. ownership really needs to be owned by the executive team for alignment to actually work. It can't be done in a vacuum in product marketing. It won't work if that's how it's done. All right, I want to do another quick poll. I think we're doing pretty good on time, but I want to do a quick poll here. Second question, where did you learn to create a positioning strategy? If this is you, if you've worked positioning, just type in whether that's like a job, it's a book, it's a course you took, it's from a mentor. I'd just love to hear where people are getting their strategy from for positioning. David said MSA, MBA, okay. So school, college, that makes sense. University, great. Anyone else willing to share? On the job, yep, that's really often too, Crystal. That's where I've learned most of mine. Also a book, mentor, yep, April's book, Slack communities. Okay, cool. This is pretty similar to what I was expecting. A lot of people learn on the job. They learn from other people. Sometimes courses as well. All right, let's keep going. So, do you want to be respectful of everyone's time? And I want to make sure you get to the next one. And we're on lesson 3 here of 6. So the third lesson was positioning is a long game. And this was echoed a lot by like Lindsay Bayok. She said, look, you can't be changing your positioning strategy every 3 to 6 months. If you're doing that, it's not going to work. It takes a while for this to pay off, right? You have to have a perspective. You have to make the investments in it, and you have to, wait for things to happen from a product perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a sales, from a customers receiving it, right? We went through a positioning overhaul at Privy very recently, beginning of this year, and we're still waiting for some of the payoff there. It's going to take a while. We're changing pricing and plans. We're changing messaging. We're changing how our sales reps interact with customers. We're changing a bunch of stuff in our product with features. So it takes a long time. That was something that quite a few of these leaders echoed. Now, there is this thing called the positioning sprint, and this is really, it's a little bit confusing. Christy Roach taught me this from Airtable. It's a little bit confusing because it's called the positioning sprint, but it's really about doing that annual checkup on your messaging, right? And so the anatomy of this is it's a 4 to 6 week sprint, probably led by product marketing or VP of marketing or someone in that capacity, to figure out the messaging for any given period of time, right? And so most often it's a year. What do we want to say for the next year? What are the things we want to say? Based on the trends in the market, based on where we're at as a product, what do we want to say that aligns with our positioning strategy, right? And what this positioning sprint requires is interviewing your executive team, internal stakeholders, maybe investors, and then customers. And then after you've done these interviews and developed the point of view, you take a pass at messaging and you got to bring that to customers, right? Bring them options of what your new messaging will look like to describe your product and the experience, et cetera. And then you test it. Right. And there's 2 ways that Christy explained testing. First of all, don't just ask, hey, do you like this? Hey, this is our new messaging. This is what we do. Do you like it? That's not going to get you anything, right? Like, it's not going to get you any kind of data. What she suggested was giving them messaging variations and asking them to stack rank those messaging variations, right? So let's say you had 4 or 5 different options. You bring that to customers and say, hey, which ones do you like? Which one's best aligned with your point of view of our product? Rank them 1 to 5, right? And then what you can do is you can bring back to your internal team, your executive team, sales team, whoever, investors. Hey, this resonated with 70% of our people, right? Or this resonated with 90% of our people that we showed it to, right? You can actually get those data points, which is going to help you make some decisions from a messaging standpoint. Also, try A/B testing if you have the volume, and A/B testing is something that you can do, whether it be an email, ad copy, landing page, homepage. Conversions are really telling, obviously, of that. And it's another way of getting data points around messaging. Okay, 4th lesson, segments matter more than personas. A couple of people said, in fact, April said, personas are bullshit. And I actually will talk about that in a second. But when it came down to putting together like a buying persona versus focusing on the segments, more of the product marketing leaders would prioritize segments than personas. So when we're talking about segments, what we're talking about is, let me read this directly. I have to zoom in here a little bit. Directly from April's book. So this is step 7 of the book. She said, segments need to meet at least 2 criteria to be worthy of focus, right? To be part of your positioning strategy and for you to focus on, the segment needs to meet these 2 pieces of criteria. First, it needs to be big enough, right? Big enough to meet your company goals, your business goals. It has to be a big enough audience. And the second, it needs to have an important, specific, unmet need that are common in that segment, right? So the example she gives is like, if you make tennis rackets, right? And you decide that you're going to do tennis rackets for seniors, you need to figure out first if there are enough tennis players, tennis playing seniors, so enough seniors that are playing tennis. You need to make sure that that audience is big enough, that segment. And then you need to make sure that your racket is uniquely suited, right? And fulfill some unmet need of seniors. And then you have a positioning strategy, right? And so segments is really important when you think about positioning. And personas, just not as much. This is a quote. We laughed because I told her I was gonna put this in a slide when I interviewed her, and because it's not like it's totally a little bit out of context. So I'll explain that real quick. She basically said, personas are a thing that often product marketers feel like they need to check the box on. They need to write these personas, and often it's kind of a vanity project because they're not really used after that, right? Especially at a smaller company. She said, spending time on segments matters a lot more. What are the characteristics of a company or the person that make them a good fit for the product, right? Depending if you're B2B or B2C. And then within that company, yes, there's often multiple personas, but ultimately it's the champion persona, right, that you need to focus on. And what happens is when you have a lot of buying personas and you end up having like 17 different personas, then you end up having 17 different messages on your website, and that just doesn't work. She's seen people make this mistake time and time again. Where personas can be helpful is usually larger organizations, and there's two different parts of that. They can be helpful when it's a more complex sale, and the buying personas, can actually add some level of clarity to that process. And the second part is when the buying persona, when it's helpful when you have a bunch of enablement teams, whether that's creative, copy, campaigns team, and they need to pull from a central place for the buying persona. When you have a large enough team, that can also be helpful to have personas. All right, the fifth one, this one's actually really quick and easy to explain. There is no universal positioning framework. So I was kind of expecting like, hey, everyone would say, this is the framework we use, and we pull from it. It'd be like this secret thing that I never heard of. I'm like, oh, that unlocks everything. That's the framework. I can use this now. I've solved this problem, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't exist. Wish it would. That's awesome. I think April's framework is there's clearly a lot more adoption happening of that now, and it seems to be successful for a lot of people, especially smaller business or startups and startups in growth mode. But there's just not one central positioning framework. So I was at least able to answer that question for myself. And then the last one, the 6 point, positioning never survives the first sales pitch. So don't make the mistake of spending all this time on a new messaging update and great, this is going to align with our strategy, and then rolling out to the sales team, because if you haven't worked with the sales team, if you haven't gotten them to go pitch it and use it and gotten feedback on it, it just won't survive, right? So Daniel always recommends starting with a small group, make those reps successful. And this has been true from my experience too. As soon as you make a couple reps successful, and it's helping them get to their number, their quota, every other rep is going to be paying attention, and they're going to want to adopt what they're doing. So that's a good strategy when it comes to sales enablement. And then the last piece, when do you know when your positioning strategy is working? And so 4 things that I found from my conversations. First, the sales team is using messaging in sales pitches. That's the first one. And I think that is a big win. I think if you haven't tried to get the sales team, on script on the same thing, then you wouldn't know this. But if you have, you'd know that getting the sales team to be, on message is sometimes a bit of a chore and a lot of work. The second is when the competition is stealing your messaging. Felt this a lot of drift. We saw a lot of other competitors start stealing messaging that we were rolling out. That was a really positive signal that, hey, it's resonating. Other people are picking up on it. Clearly, they're losing ground to us for it. So why wouldn't they steal from us? The third, A/B testing shows higher conversion rates. So when you actually do the testing and you say, hey, this messaging is working. Hey, that message is working a lot better than what we had before. We're converting a lot more people into our freemium funnel or trials or demos or whatever that offer is. That's obviously a good indication when messaging was the difference maker. And then the fourth and final, customers are using the messaging back at you, and that's happening. And they're on calls and support tickets, in emails, on Twitter or wherever. When they're using your messaging that you crafted, they're using it back at you, which happens more than you would think. that's another good indication that your messaging is working and it's sticking. Okay,